But apparently the first 2 episodes of One Piece Season 2 will be released in 200 theaters across the world. Normally, I wouldn't care, you know? I let people watch what they want to watch. I'm not a big One Piece live action guy. I think the shit look goofy. It's not for me. But, you know, that's not my bag. I don't care. However, this theater thing is kind of what I want to talk about. This whole theater trend is what I want to talk about because I think we are real time witnessing a shift in how series are going to be released, and I think anime is being used as somewhat of a testing ground to see if this works, because I'm not gonna lie, a Netflix series doubling up in theaters, this feels weird. And it feels weird because I think corporations in general have realized that anime fans, the anime audience in their own weird way, have proven themselves to be a movie going audience in sort of an industry that otherwise is dying. I think in general, and I can pull the numbers up for it, but in general, movie ticket sales have been on the decline year on year, basically since COVID. But ever since the 2020 Demon Slayer movie, there has been a pretty drastic shift in the way that anime are being released. And I think we're reaching like the cash-in phase of this, right? Now, oddly enough, I feel like if you go back, right, in a weird way, this is somewhat of a return to form, given that, you know what I mean? If you go back, way back to when anime was first making its rounds in the Western hemisphere, it was mainly movies, right? We had like Akira, we had Ghibli movies. The Pokemon movie, when it first dropped, was a real big one. That did a lot for the anime industry in general. I think when the Pokemon movie aired in theaters, that was the biggest anime movie of the time. And so in its own weird way, I think there is like an alternate timeline where what we're watching now happens sooner, where anime is primarily consumed through movies, a la like Disney, Marvel, etc., etc. I think there is an alternate timeline where that is the case. However, that's not how things played out, right? And the majority of the anime community, the majority of the anime watching fandom, at least here in the West, got into anime through shows. Now, movies had always been there, right? I know y'all remember the Dragon Ball movies coming up. I'll go as far as to say that for me, now that I really think about it, the Dragon Ball movies probably played a stronger role in me becoming an anime fan and a Dragon Ball fan than the show did. I think the fact that Broly started off as a movie character and then was adapted into canon kind of proves that. I mean, yeah, the Dragon Ball movies were fire, bro. We had Broly movie, we had the BoJack movie, we had Janemba movie, both Broly movies. Weren't there like 3? They had Bio Broly. The Pokemon movies, Naruto movies were a thing. I don't know if anyone really watched those. I'm not gonna hold you. I don't know anyone who's like, oh yeah, bro, Naruto in the because they had sequel movies, they had prequel movies, they had the whole 9, but they never really did numbers like that. One Piece films were a thing too. Bleach movies were a thing. The big 3 got movies, right? And so this isn't anything new. However, I think the primary difference that we're seeing is that I think studios and I think publishers realize no one's trying to watch movies that aren't manga canon, right? No one's trying to watch like random side stories that don't fit into the main story. And so the shift that we're seeing now, we are getting actual canon content adapted into movies. You know what I mean? Like required viewing if you want to stay tapped in. And I think that's an interesting change. And I don't know how good or bad that might be. The MHA movies were doing good. The MHA movies were doing okay. Here's what I'll say about the My Hero Academia movies. The My Hero Academia movies, they did well because they had a huge audience, right? I feel like the My Hero Academia movies were like ground zero for this current trend that we're seeing. You know what I mean? Because My Hero went the route of, you know, what Naruto and Dragon Ball and all those series. My Hero went the route of what those series before them did. And they did kind of like semi-canon movies. Like, okay, My Hero movies are weird because they're retroactively canon. You know what I'm saying? The movie would air and then they would go, oh yeah, nah, bro, that actually happened, bro. That actually happened. He did fight 9 in the timeline. He did fight Fleck Turn in the timeline. And if you ask me, as someone who will glaze My Hero to hell and back, I will say that the movies, they kind of fucked the already messed up timeline, bro. I mean, the timeline is already my biggest critique of My Hero, right? They had like 10 days between one giant event and another giant event. You know, the nigga got his powers and by the end of the year damn near lost them. And throwing 3 movies into that already shaky timeline, I don't think that was good for the series as a whole. But I would say My Hero was ground zero, right? My Hero was like, okay, we have this huge anime that's massively popular in the West. Let's see if we can make some movies out of it. They dropped movie 1. That shit was cool. They dropped movie 2. I think movie 2 was the one with 9, right? They dropped movie 2 with 9. That one did pretty well. They dropped movie 3, and I feel like movie 3 was the worst sort of all around. I remember they marketed those fresh ass, the all black fits. Y'all remember the all black fits? How hype niggas were to see the all black fits, and they had them motherfuckers on for 2 minutes for one Fortnite dive out of the plane. Movie 3 wasn't it. I'm sorry. What was movie 3? Movie 3 was the one where Deku became like an international criminal or some shit, and he fought Fleckturn, who was leading a whole cult of hundreds, if not thousands, of quirkless people while having a quirk himself. It was goofy. Movie 4, movie 4 was pretty weird too, especially timeline wise. First, they did the weird mafia shit. It was like, okay, sure. But then also timeline wise, it was between Deku's vigilante arc in the Shigaraki fight, which means that there's just this whole, like, you know what I mean? In those 2 weeks, apparently, there was another apocalyptic happening, which again, makes it very, very weird timeline wise. And even though there were cool moments, like, you know, having it all tie together when they would cameo random characters during the final fight saying, "Do your best, Izuku," it just fucked up the timeline, right? So My Hero, they kind of fumbled the bag, at least at the box office. But I do think they started something, right? Fast forward to 2020. 2020 is where I say the turning point was, because 2020 was the Mugen Train movie. Now, we could pull the numbers up. If I remember correctly, the Mugen Train movie, and it was kind of a Mickey Mouse victory. If I remember correctly, the Mugen Train movie was the best-selling movie globally that year. Of course, it was kind of a Mickey Mouse victory because of COVID, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't going up against the heavy hitters it probably usually would have gone up against. But I think that was the signal to the industry that, oh, hold on, there's some paper to be made at the box office, bro. And I will say, okay, I did enjoy that movie. I enjoyed that's honestly one of my favorite anime viewing memories, bro. And y'all were on some bullshit when that movie first aired. First of all, half the niggas in my theater, like, snuck in. I paid for that shit fair and square with the little bit of scraps of paper that I had at the time as a college freshman. And half the niggas in that theater were like, did not pay for that shit, bro. They just stormed the theater because they had one like 16-year-old ticket boy. It was COVID. Like, the whole world was like tweaking, bro. So that was that. But it was a fun experience. And I do, as much as many anime movies have come after the Demon Slayer movie, for me personally, the Demon Slayer movie 2020 will always be that one. What the Demon Slayer movie tapped into that the other movies hadn't tapped into before was that it adapted canon content. If you wanted to see that shit first, you had to see the movie. That shit wasn't coming on Crunchyroll for another year, where they just replayed the same shit as episodes. And they were very intelligent in doing that, and it worked. It worked well. They dropped that movie, and that movie did great. And then the following years, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, the following years, apart from My Hero, which was still doing its non-canon, you know, bullshit method, we started to see more and more of the big series kind of take what I call the Demon Slayer method, right? We're like, all right, JJK, we got JJK season 1, and then we had JJK 0. Canon content that introduced many important characters, namely Yuta and Rika. But it's canon content that introduced many important characters that you had to go to the movies to see. And that was also a good experience. That was a fun experience. Then this is when shit started to get cheese. This is when niggas started to get greedy. This is when things started to change. Demon Slayer, I'll give it to them. Ufotable, I know they had their tax evasion issues, and I'm gonna tell you why they had those tax evasion issues. Those niggas are some bag chasers. I don't know who is the mastermind behind Ufotable's strategy, but them niggas gonna find a way to run up some dollars, bro. Cause look, Ufotable not only started the movie trend, they also, with Demon Slayer season 3, started this bullshit ass first 3 episodes in theater trend. And they did some evil shit too. Here's what they did. I'll never forget. They said, yeah, we're gonna show y'all the beginning of the what was it, Swordsmith Village, I think? They said, yeah, we're gonna show y'all the beginning of the Swordsmith Village arc in theaters. Niggas was hype. Oh shit, Mugen Train Part 2, like, you know what I mean? People went, they pre-ordered their tickets. They said it's only in select theaters for a few days. Niggas bought out their tickets, sold them out like that. You go to the theater. Am I watching the end of Entertainment District? Am I watching the end of Entertainment District for 40? I'm sitting here in this theater, right? I think I went with a friend, and I'm like, yo, bro, am I tweaking? I keep looking at my phone, seeing how much time is left. I'm thinking they're gonna do a quick little recap of Entertainment District. No, they went through 2 episodes of that shit, bro. They went through 2 episodes of that shit, and it had the nerve at the very last minute to drop that exposition ass first episode of Swordsmith Village. That was some evil shit, bro. And they caught a lot of flack for that too. I remember niggas was on their ass. And after that, all the series that went to do that afterward, they were a bit more honest. They said, oh yes, it's a rescreening and you get a, you know, they tried to reframe the marketing. They said, oh no, you're not paying for the movie. You're paying for a theater screening and we're giving you the first 2 episodes as bonus. Okay. But that right there, that was some real bag chaser shit, right? Because they're already going to make the episodes anyway. They're already going to sell, like, you know, they're going to put them on Crunchyroll, put them up for streaming. They're going to make money off that, you know, manga sales, whatever. Why not just run them in theaters and get ticket bread too? And other studios and other producers took note, because then 𝙏𝙠 came around and did the same thing. At least 𝙏𝙠 did it a bit better, right? 𝙏𝙠 did, if I remember correctly, they did 1 episode recap and then 2 original episodes. Okay, I can respect that. JJK did the same thing. I didn't watch the JJK one. And I think that right there is going to be method from now on, or at least for the foreseeable future, that's going to be method, where we're going to see most of these major anime are either going to adapt major arcs into movies, or they're going to do this first 2 episode bullshit, which I'm not mad at, honestly. It is fun going to the theater and watching them. It's just, you know what I'm saying? For me, it's so-so. Now we gotta open the dialogue on Netflix, bro, because once Netflix gets their hands on something, that's how you know it's straight bag chasage, bro. Netflix is like, I'd say they're like slightly more corporate than Crunchyroll. Post Sony Crunchyroll. Slightly more corporate, right? Now Netflix, I think Netflix is peeping game, right? Netflix is peeping game, and they're peeping that anime adjacent audiences, because anime fans are some freaks that love leaks and early shit and just consume content like a tornado, like a vortex, like a black hole. Netflix is on game, because let's look at the 2 things that Netflix, that I know of. Did they release Stranger Things in theaters? But that I know of. The 2 series that Netflix has ran in theaters to some degree are K-pop Demon Hunters and now this One Piece live action. And I find it very interesting that both of those series are extremely anime adjacent. K-pop Demon Hunters, I get. That shit was like a super hit, all right? I know Sony is mad as hell that they released that shit on Netflix first instead of right to theaters. When K-pop Demon Hunters 2, 3, 4, and 5 come out, they're all coming to theaters first. But I understand why they put that in theaters. That, you know, if you want to argue that wasn't due to it being anime adjacent, fair. Though I will say a large part of the reason I think that movie even surfaced the way it did and got the clout it did was because of its adjacency to anime, K-pop, stan culture in general, but that's a whole nother dialogue for a whole nother day. Doesn't Netflix low-key want theaters gone though? I think Netflix in 2016 probably wanted theaters gone, but I think now Netflix, now that theaters are hollowed out, now that no one's going, Netflix is saying, hold on, they're turning in an All for One, bro. All for One, he didn't want One for All gone. He wanted to absorb that shit. He wanted that power for himself. And so Netflix is saying, hold on, theaters, they already need a lifeline. They already need a lifeline. Shit, let me throw One Piece live action in that bitch. 2 episodes just cause. Why? Cause the bread, and the theaters aren't gonna say no. Them niggas gotta sell Pochita popcorn boxes like that one back there just to make $1 now. They're already on their last limb. So Netflix, I think, is really trying to, like, on the low, they trying to like hostile take over that shit via, they're starting with anime and anime adjacent content. You know how Nami from One Piece be getting them berry signs on her eyes, bro? Them dollar signs on her eyes? That's what they seeing right now, bro. Now I will say this, there is opportunity here, right? Because the one thing we haven't talked about yet is the fact that we have also gotten a decent, and there's always been a semi-steady amount of just straight up anime movies coming out in theaters. Not anime movies tied to any given series, not anime movies that were canon or no. Like just straight, this is a standalone movie that happens to be told through the medium of anime. Your Name, A Silent Voice, you know, they were always those like teen drama type movies. A Silent Voice is the GOAT, by the way. Even more recently, we had like 100 Meters. There's a movie called Scarlet, and what I hope ends up happening is that we get more 100 Meters, bro. We get more look back, even though that's manga adaptation, but one-shot adaptation. I hope we get more adaptations as standalone movies that don't particularly have to tie into any given other series. You know what I mean? Don't have to be oh, this is 𝙏𝙖 versus 𝙏𝙖𝙡, bro. We're doing this as a movie, which let's be real. I would put every dollar I have right now that 𝙏𝙖 versus 𝙏𝙗 will be released as a movie, and it's probably gonna be a fire ass movie. Let's keep it aside. That shit is gonna be fun. But like, at least for me, that's kind of when it's like, for me, that's when it's time to wrap it up, bro. Like, all right, this movie shit is getting played out. But if we can get more original anime movies, that would be fire. If this brings more money to the industry, at least to more content, better pay for anime being, and I think it's starting to get there, but being treated more broadly as sort of blockbuster media, that would be fire. I'll say this, if they took a series, if they took a Shonen Jump series, let's say, I don't know what a good one to do would be. What's popular in Shonen Jump right now that isn't confirmed for adaptation yet? 𝙏𝙖 the Witch. I haven't really read 𝙏𝙖 the Witch. I don't know if this would be good for 𝙏𝙖 the Witch. But if they took 𝙏𝙖 the Witch or some sort of series and said, hey, we're adapting this whole series in only movies on like some MCU, Marvel, DC type shit, right? Where we have this storyline and we're dedicating it only to movies, and so this is going to be movies beginning to end, 1, 2, and 3. I could deal with that. No, I don't want them doing that for every series ever. But if they did that for one series, I think that could be interesting. One of my favorite adaptations is a adaptation of the Monogatari series, a part of the Monogatari series called 𝙏𝙬 which is 3 movies that tell the storyline, 3 standalone movies, or they're not really standalone movies, but 3 movies that stand alone as a series, and that's cool. But this season movie, that's what it's feeling like for Chainsaw Man. Yeah, and see, I would be cool with that if they started off like that. If Chainsaw Man started off as a movie, season 1 was a movie, which they honestly could have done. The compilation movie was pretty good. I don't know if y'all have seen it, but if they did that with Chainsaw Man and just did like movie 1, like beginning arc, movie 2, Rise arc, movie 3, assassin arc, movie 4, final spoiler arc, I'd be cool with that. But again, because they did season, you got to watch a whole season, then 3 movies, that fucks up the vibes in my eyes. I just feel like if they keep spamming movie method, it's going to get to a point where it doesn't feel special anymore. If we're being honest, unless you're building a story to be for a movie, the story gets truncated to a point where it gets kind of butchered, or not even butchered, just a lot of content gets skipped. If we're just looking at it from a storytelling perspective, for the way most anime are released, which are either weekly or monthly, they're released like an anthology, like volumes. They're released bit by bit by bit by bit. They're usually meant to be consumed bit by bit by bit by bit, or binged all the way through. They're like optimized for that. They're made to be shows as opposed to, being made to be movies. Oh, I forgot about them sorry ass AOT movies, bro. That was the most cornball shit I ever seen in my life, bro. They said, yeah, we gonna put the very end of the final arc in theaters, then on, like, that's what I don't want, bro. I don't want the content to just be like, hey, we have this content that we have to release. Fuck it, let's just drop it as a movie. Free bread. And then we'll put it up on streaming, whatever. If you're gonna be a movie, then make a movie and stand on that. But do it because it works artistically and for the content. Don't just do it for the bread. With all that said, I always like comparing, right, to kind of wrap up my thoughts on this. I always like comparing the anime industry to the comic book industry. Because at least here in the West, I think the two mirror each other with like a 20 to 40 year stagger. And what I mean by that is that in a lot of ways, anime is going down the same path that comics did, just about 20 years behind. Comic book franchises, they used to be primarily consumed between obviously their comics and TV shows. Them old ass Batman shows, them old ass Spider-Man shows, you name a big hero, they probably were in a TV show before they were ever in a movie. And that was the primary method of consumption, animated and sometimes live action TV shows. Fast forward, early 2000s, Sony, ironically enough, goes, yo, what if we put Spider-Man into a movie? We get the Spider-Man trilogy, That's All She Wrote. A few years later, Iron Man trilogy, MCU, and that lasted a cool 10, 15 years until it became the clusterfuck of boring nothingness that it is now. MCU gotta be its own dialogue, bro, because that shit fell off. Anime, I think, is converging onto a similar path, at least how it's consumed here in the West. It starts off being consumed, manga, the books, the comics, and the shows. Once again, it's looking like Sony was the one who went, okay, cool, but what if we put this shit in a movie and got theater bread for it? That happened, and I fear that it goes down the same path. Now, I think anime has a few advantages that these other like comics don't have, namely just the amount of content that comes out. You know what I mean? We have an infinite pool of anime to pick from that have almost never been tapped into, and more coming out every fucking day, it feels like. So they have more content to work from. But even so, a lot of the anime audience just wants to watch shows. And so I just hope they don't butcher. I just hope they don't butcher what we already have. I want to see movies, but just have them be standalones.